So first of all, I just want to absolutely, I'm Dr. Lisa Norton, and I'm Dean of the College of Education Health Sciences for Touro University, California. And I'm definitely going to turn it over to Dr. Luis Santiago, our very esteemed new director of the Grad School of Education and Assistant Dean for the College of Education and Health Sciences. Dr. Santiago has been with us for quite a few years running our educational leadership program and has stepped into the leadership role this past year. So really excited. So this was really the brainchild of her and Dr. Onojuju, who's on the call and who's now joined our faculty as one of our adjuncts in helping us build this. We have an equity, diversity, and inclusion program. That's our master's program. So he's really helping us kind of build the program. So Dr. Santiago, I'm going to lead it over to you. And I'm so excited to welcome all our esteemed panelists and all our guests. I see we have 31 guests so far. So hopefully that number will continue to grow as we get started.
Yes, and thank you to everybody for joining, and really on such short notice, because we did put this together very quickly. Much thanks to Dr. Michael Barber, who really did the lift on getting all the webinars set up and worked with our advancement office. I see Diosa on the call today, who did an amazing job putting together the flyer, if you've seen the website, because this will be a series and we'll have a slightly different flavor of this topic every week. In terms of just really promoting diversity in the educator workforce. And so I am just thrilled to be able to hand the baton to Ijeoma, because Ijeoma and I go way back. But if I tell you how far back we go, then you'll know how old I am, because I'm a heck of a lot older than he is. And Ijeoma and I ran into each other again after so many years. About, God, is it like a year and a half ago now, I think, Ijeoma, maybe even 2 years?
About a year and a half ago.
Yeah, and Ijeoma and I started talking because we both are so invested in this work, in this topic, in terms of increasing diversity in the educator workforce. And so we launched an initiative with one of our partners, the Solano County Office of Ed, and Dr. Lizette Estrella Henderson and Mike Minahan. We're so excited to be part of that. We had different representatives from many of the different districts just talking every month about what can we do to help increase the diversity in the pipeline. And then this topic and this webinar series and all just sort of came to fruition just in the last few weeks. And I'm excited to be here. So Ijeoma, I have nothing else to say other than thank you.
No, it's no problem. I'll definitely be brief because I want to defer to our panelists who have joined us today. But I would just say that I was fortunate enough as a child to have two Black male teachers. My sixth grade teacher was Mr. Grant at Cooper Elementary. And then I had Mr. Hasten, who was my social science teacher at Vallejo Junior High School when I was in the seventh grade. So back-to-back Black male teachers, sixth and seventh grade. But outside of that, I didn't have any. Well, technically not. I did have Coach Isidore, who was on with us today. I can't call him Mr. I got to call him Coach. But I had Coach Isidore as my dean when I was in high school. And those three Black men really have stood out to me as impactful teachers, but it really didn't dawn on me that their impact on me was partially because they were Black men. It wasn't until I became an educator and got into my studies where I realized what was normal to me of having two Black male or three Black male educators as part of my K through 12 education was very abnormal when you look at everyone else, right? To the point where now as a professor, most of my students come into my class and they say, "You're the first Black teacher I've ever had." And you know, I'm real bayish for those who understand. I'm real bayish when I'm in my class, and so it's a complete culture shock to my students, because not only have they not had a Black male teacher, but now they have a Black male teacher who is presenting a different type of educator professionalism to them that they're not very used to, right? They still get the same content, and in many ways, we go even deeper than they go in their traditional classes, but it's a culture shock to them when they first get me. And so the question that Louise and I really vibed on was, how do we make this more the norm and not the abnorm? How do we get more of us into the teaching profession? And so this is a very timely discussion, because we're also in a moment in time where a push for more inclusion, more equity, more diversity, more social justice as it relates to the systems that we interact with is at the forefront of the conversations. And so we just wanted to be able to bring this to you all today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our panelists, and hopefully you all can say a few words and then we'll kind of get into it. How's that sound? All right, I'm gonna go in the order that is on the flyer so that folks can kind of go along with me. But first we have Dr. Adam Clark, who is the current superintendent of Mount Diablo School District and the former superintendent of Vallejo City Unified. How you doing, Dr. Adams?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm so glad to have the opportunity to participate on this panel. I know from personal experience, I know how much work Toro does to reach out to their community in which they serve. And, during my time in Vallejo, Toro was, such a strong partner that we had in really trying to, support teachers, support administrators, and just support the district. So I'm honored to give my services and my expertise and my experiences to this very, very worthy cause. So again, just happy to be here and happy to share and see how we can continue to move this conversation forward.
Thank you. Next, he jumped on at the right time.
We able to move him over from attendee to panelist.
Yes, very quick. We have Councilman Hakeem Brown, who is the councilman here in the city of Vallejo.
Thank you, and thank you for your words. When you say you're very Bayish, that perked my ears up and resonates with me. And I think this is a great topic, and I appreciate you and Toro University talking about this, because I'm a Vallejo kid as well. Never had a black male teacher my entire life. I see that on the internet every now and then. I'm like, never had one. Never had anybody that I could identify with, or someone who said, hey, though you may not be ready for college, you actually still have a future, and you have the potential to be great. And that's kind of Vallejo's story. Too many kids go in that direction. And so I think this is a great topic, and I'm looking forward to how we can move the conversation forward.
Excellent, thank you. Next, again, I've talked about him before, but one of my high school football coaches, but also someone that I really have looked up to as an educational leader. He's currently a principal in the Fairfield Unified School District, Mr. Clarence Isidore.
Welcome, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. First of all, I want to say welcome, Dr. Clark. We go way back from St. Mary's, and again, Mrs. Santiago and Ijeoma from just St. Pat's, St. Vincent's. I want to say I'm just so proud to be able to have an impact on my community and students as whole, as I deal with the issues every day that face students and staff of color. I feel that I am there as a vocal piece to kind of bridge that gap, to give them that information, to set that tone, to be a guidance, because the issues that they face are very real. And as I get into more discussion, more in depth, I'll talk about how we can support those systems, but it is an extreme pleasure to be serving on this panel, to be able to talk about this conversation that is amongst us. So thank you.
Awesome, awesome. All right, the next, this is one of the brothers that as soon as I posted the picture on my IG, folks started hitting me up and said, do you know Brother Tolliver? I said, I ain't never met him, but tonight will be the first time I meet him. So we have, he's Administrator in Vacaville Unified School District, Mr. Aaron Tolliver.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this, and I grew up in Solano County, Fairfield, since 1977. My family has been around a while. The Tolliver name, of course, a lot of you may know, but I remember Dr. Black on the panel that we had saw before, and he talks about that students get access to Black men. And I know that I didn't get that access. And we're talking one of the most diverse places, not only in the state, but in the country. But yet I had Moses York was the only Black male teacher that I had. And that was seventh grade science. And went all the way through Armio, no Black teacher. So as an educator, if I can give access to someone to really know who I am and what I'm about, not only as a Black man, but just as a professional educator, I think that we're heading down the right road once that can happen consistently. So.
Awesome. Next on my list, he is currently an elementary school teacher. And this is pretty amazing because not only are there a lack of males who want to be elementary school teachers, but to be a Black male elementary school teacher, he is the epitome of what we would call a unicorn. So, Mr. Michael Henry.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am unbelievably honored to be on this panel with such amazing panelists. I've worked under Dr. Clark, had personal conversations with the next mayor of Vallejo, Hakeem Brown. I hope that my insight on actually being in the system, working it currently, can give some insight to everybody in what we're trying to accomplish, which is building and sustaining African-American male teachers, getting them here, keeping them here, and serving our students in California better.
Excellent. And then finally, we have another teacher from Fairfield. We must not have any Black male teachers in Vallejo Unified School District, but we have either that or they all leave. But we have Mr. Jeffrey Scott.
All right, thank you for having me. It's definitely an honor to be able to participate in here. I grew up in Oakland, California. I didn't have a Black male teacher until I think 7th grade, Mr. Akins, my math teacher, and then I had a Black PE teacher. And then in high school, I had another gym teacher who was African-American. And I had one of those students as well in my second year teaching, a Black student who just told me, he was like, "You're my first Black male teacher." And I was like, wow. And that really kind of opened my eyes to what it can just mean to be present and be a representation. So definitely, again, it's an honor to be here and grateful that I can, share any knowledge or experience that I have with you guys.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate all of you participating. I think what I appreciate most about this panel is that we have every level of schooling covered in terms of everything from teachers in the classroom, teachers to administrators, to professors, to the councilman who works on the policy end of things. So looking forward to this conversation. To get us started, I will just ask the most obvious question and then we can kind of go from there. But why do you think there are a lack of Black males who go into the educational profession?
Yeah, I'll kind of jump off and try to address that. So, growing up in elementary school and high school, I wasn't always the the best student and the model student, and of course I was an athlete and thought that would take me to other places, and so I really never really saw myself as teacher material. Although I had, probably the best, African-American teacher, and that was my dad, who, was an educator. And so I was able to see that in him, but I really didn't see myself as someone who would go into the teaching profession. And it wasn't until working my way through college that I actually wanted to turn this this summer job that I had of working with students in summer camps into a profession. And so I actually was one of the few. I was an elementary teacher. I was an elementary teacher in South Richmond, Martin Luther King Elementary School for 5 years. And often what happens with male teachers at the elementary level is that we quickly get moved through the ranks into administration, or I wanted to be a primary teacher. That means I wanted to work with kids before they hit 3rd grade so that I could make sure their reading level was on par, so that we could stop the prison pipeline. However, I quickly got moved into the upper grades. And so I think 2 things is that we don't see ourselves as teachers. And then when we do step into the profession, we quickly get moved up to, dealing with older kids and things of that nature.
I'll piggyback off of what Dr. Clark had said. Growing up in schools and not having a Black male educator to give me that influence. Once I got to college and then kind of found myself and where my journey was going to take me, and then coming to work at that summer camp to work with kids and say, wow, this is pretty spectacular. Mrs. Santiago and I go way back from St. Vincent's School for Boys, and just working with kids and coaching, and then saying, wow, I'm having an impact because the kids are listening to me. And why don't you go into education? Because you have that engagement with kids, and then making sure that I already had the foundation. And once I got into education at the teacher level, it was moving straight into an assistant, a dean, or something for the authoritative position. Never was I thinking of, I want to be at the top, the principal, because that was like, no, I don't want that piece of it. But I want to say, the great, and you all know this name, the great Joe Jones told me, he says, you're not going to make no change or no policy if you ain't at the top. So if you want to make change and you want to have an impact, you need to lead it. And so that's where I'm at today, of making that change based on the leadership level of just the journey through working with kids and engaging them. So I want to thank Dr. Clark for just that testimony of working with kids. Summer camp,
I think there's so many different reasons on why there's not a whole lot of Black male educators. And of course, I talked about access. As you're a student, do you have access to Black men, or is your only access to Black males what you see on TV and what you see on the news? And does that shape your opinion on Black men? And I'm talking about not only Black kids, but all sorts of kids. Then I think it was Iojima had talked about being from the Bay, and the way that students will see him kind of culturally. Maybe they can see themselves within him. Maybe other kids say, oh, wow, that's an educated Black man, and I have access to him, and that kind of makes me better. Dr. Taquan Stewart talked about an identity exchange, kind of a cultural disrobing that happens as students of color are asked to assimilate into the American educational machine. And so I'm famous for making sports analogies, so here's another one. So I kind of look at this educational machine as a right-handed baseball glove. By itself, the glove is fine. It's made of leather. It protects your hand. And even if you get the right glove, it's got kangaroo fur on the inside, and it's real comfortable if you get the right glove. But in this example, too many kids are left-handed. Too many kids are, I can't use this right-handed glove. You can give me all the bells and whistles, but it doesn't mean a damn thing to me because I'm left-handed. But these kids are still going to be judged on their ability to play this game with a left-handed glove. And you know what happens with a lot of kids is they just throw the glove on the ground and go, you know what? I'm done with this. This sport doesn't suit me. Right? So unless there's a coach that's willing to walk that, whoa, hold on a second, kid, put their arm around him and go, hold on a second, maybe we can do certain things to get you back into the game. But if there isn't someone like that, then what happens? And there, we lose that kid in education. And especially when it comes time for them to be grown and they've had such negative experiences in education, when the thought comes to be a teacher, with the amount of schooling you have to do, with the rate of pay, I just don't think that it's interesting given all the pain that has happened before and what you have to go through in order to get there. And I think that, you know, that's it, given the systemic racism that is right there in our schools too, having to go through that, not really feeling like there was a voice. So if I had no voice when I was a teenager or when I was in elementary school, is this the right profession for me? You know, so those are just some reasons that I think that the barriers to entry for a lot of Black men just aren't necessarily there. It's just not that attractive.
If I could jump in, I would say, so I actually spent a lot of time at Vallejo Schools with another familiar name for all of you, Mr. Tony Gross. And I think getting a legend here in Vallejo and getting kind of a lesson in what I should be looking for and what I shouldn't be looking for when we walk into a classroom, and what are some of the patterns. Some of the patterns are when we ask these kids, most of the young Black men are going to name, well, what's your plan A? Football. What's your plan B? Baseball. Okay, what's your plan C? Well, boxing. You know, what's the attendance level at the school districts? What's the disciplining? And quite often the disparity is right there when you see young Black men who aren't attending school, young Black men who are having discipline issues. And when you talk about it from a policy standpoint, how can these kids and young people even start to think about what profession they want to go into if they don't have stable housing, if they don't have a stable environment, if they're dealing with gunshots on a day-to-day basis, they're dealing with drug abuse and drug addiction on a day-to-day basis. And I think that here in Vallejo, I'm sure that there are some national data that will point you in certain directions, but here we're dealing with generational poverty that needs to be addressed. A kid's gonna have a hard time living in a stable environment growing up in Vallejo because the city just hasn't invested enough time in its kids. And those kids have grown up to be parents and, quite honestly, now grandparents, and 3 generations of poverty.
I mean, everything you guys have said, I couldn't agree more. I know from me being an athlete, finishing school, I grew up in Oakland, moved back and forth between Vallejo and Fairfield. I played football out in Kansas, and I kind of hit a point where it was just like, okay, what's next? You know, a lot of times people don't understand the what's next. And I have a degree in communication studies. No, I had no intentions of being a teacher. You know, I actually moved from Kansas back to Vallejo because my brother actually got assigned a head football coach for freshmen at Jesse Bethel. Again, still my idea was never to become a teacher. I think because we put the stigma on teaching as one of those platforms that are too hard to reach. You know, we tell kids all the time, you know, why do you want to be an athlete? Why do you want to be a rapper or a barber? Those things. Why don't you become a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher? We hold that stigma of teacher almost as untouchable. And so when a kid sees it or hears, you know, someone like me in my classroom, I tell the kids all the time, why don't you become a teacher? Oh man, that's too much. You know, they see it as an unattainable goal. I know for me, I always thought I couldn't be a teacher. I'm not book smart. I was a average C, B student. I don't like kids. I don't like being in the classroom. I never, you know, it was so many hurdles that I had to break down to myself to get to this point. I think that we don't do a well enough job in the community to break down those barriers at the elementary level. You know, we don't do a good enough job to let the kids know that being a teacher is vital. It's important. And it's not one of those jobs that will take you 70 years to get to. You know, it's something that can be done once you finish high school. You can go straight into take classes to become a teacher. I know that's one of my stigmas when I look at why we have a hard time getting male educators into this profession, of African-American males into this profession, is that we don't do well enough to educate them on how to get here. You know, we just, you know, a lot of times we look, the kids go on these social media sites and they see these guys with fancy cars and a lot of money. And I saw one the other day where the caption was, "I had all F's on my report card." You know, the kid doesn't, you know, that devalues education, and it increases the value of making easy money. And like what I do is, you know, I don't wear suits. I don't wear dress shirts to school. I wear t-shirts. I wear Jordans. I wear, you know, the nice jeans. I want to show those kids that this is obtainable. This, you know, the new Jordans that came out this weekend, yeah, I have them. I'm a teacher. I'm not a rapper. I'm not a basketball player. This is not hard. We can get there. And I think that we need to do a better job of teaching kids that this is obtainable. It's something that you want, and it's something that you can have.
Jeffrey, you're the only one that hasn't responded, but I want to add a little bit extra to it to kind of frame your answer. Just reading through the chat as you all are speaking, and one of our attendees pointed out that the biggest problem is that not enough of us are going to college, and not enough of us are college ready to even think about potentially getting into the profession of teaching. I was hoping that as you responded to the original question, you could possibly touch on that a little bit as well.
Wow, you just added a whole nother level to everything. So there's so many facets to it. I mean, definitely touching on the original question and what Tolliver and Isidore, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah, Isidore was saying, one is the attractiveness of teaching just isn't there, if I'm gonna be completely honest, when in comparison to other careers. I'm not saying that teachers got to be like driving Bentleys and things like that, but just the wages, the conditions of teaching is not the most attractive. And in touching on what Isidore is saying, Mr. Isidore, I didn't, like, when I left high school, I wasn't planning on going back into a school. Like, I was pretty much done. I thought I was done. And I just happened to fall into teaching and figure out that I loved it because of those experiences that Mr. Isidore was talking about. And even now, my love for what I do is what keeps me in a job that doesn't pay as much as like being a construction worker, what I originally thought I was going to do. So I think a piece of it is the lack of attractiveness as far as a piece of why Black males aren't getting into it, possibly, is the lack of attractiveness, and also maybe the lack of access to experiences, as well as what Mr. Henry was saying is the seeing that it's accessible. I've had students like just really just wowed at the fact that I'm there, and they're like asking me these questions, how did I get there? And the things that I take for granted, they're like, they don't even understand as far as getting into college and things. When it comes to college, I'm trying to think about it. I mean, me personally, it could be, again, the attractiveness of it as far as getting into college, especially now with so many students talking about debt and things. It's like, is it worth it? What is the payoff when I can learn a trade or something versus going through all these years to get a degree that isn't going to sustain me financially? I mean, that can play a part in it. So yeah, I'm sorry I don't have all the answers for your second question.
I like that conversation because a lot of us, athletics was our ticket out. Athletics took us because we had PAL, Police Activities League, we had Little League. Our parents were engaged in taking us to athletic events. And because of our functioning in athletics, somehow we had that ticket to go to college. If your college was going to be to the left or your college is going to be on the right, so be it. But once to get to the college level and to go to a historical all-Black college, Langston University in Oklahoma, it made me think a lot differently because now I saw educators who looked like me, and they were mentoring me on the journey. And I think that a lot of times is a struggle, just like we have struggles here in high school. We don't mentor to the kids on the next level enough in the classroom or outside of the classroom. We tell you, hey, you're going to do fine, you're going to do fine. But when we got to college and I was a little bit more mature, the mentoring ship came from teacher after person after teacher on what are you going to do to support more people that looks like you. And education is a place, get your teacher's credential, go into education. And that was where the light bulb came on to say, wow, that mentorship of giving back to my community was huge. But some of us, if we didn't have athletics, we'd probably be in prison.
I just wanted, if I could just touch on just something real quick about, what was said by, by both of you, is that, when you look at the profession of teaching, it actually, and this is how it was kind of explained to me, it's actually, pretty good. I mean, you have summers off, you're not necessarily working 9 to 5, the opposite end of, going and doing construction, unfortunately, a lot of our young kids don't know what being a laborer is like on a construction site and things of that nature. And so, I mean, I worked all my life, and once I learned that I can make a living without using my back and using my body, then it really did, open up a whole new world for me. But I think one thing that I think that we can capitalize on is that there are a group of young people who are coming up who actually want to make an impact on the world, right? And want to make an impact in their community. And if we somehow could tap into those young people and be real clear with what the path is to become a teacher, because you can do it with junior college and with some of the supports out there, some of the state schools and some of the support that private schools give. You can get a 4-year degree without it costing an arm and a leg. It just depends on if you're looking for that 4-year college experience and things of that nature. But I think, the economics of it all, not only can you make a living without using your body and your back, but you can also have a huge impact, on society, on your community. And as we all know, when you work with young people, it does something for your soul and for your spirit. And that is something that I don't think too many other professions can offer. So I just really want us to also keep that as part of the conversation.
So
Yeah,
I want to kind of just build off that a little bit. And if y'all haven't looked, the chat room is blowing up. I don't even know if they listen to anything that we saying, because they are having conversations with each other in the chat. It's a whole nother webinar in there. But
they're all based off of your comments. That's what they're jumping off of.
There's something that I've heard almost as a consistent narrative from all of you. It was also a narrative that I found when I did my dissertation, which is this idea that I didn't want to be a teacher and I just kind of fell into it. This person came and got me, or I had proximity to some kids, or I just needed a job, and next thing I know, I'm here and I've been here, right? I juxtapose that with the students in my teacher education classes, right? And I'll go to the other side of the spectrum and say, like, I get a lot of Caucasian women in my classes that are like, hey, I wanted to be a teacher ever since the 2nd grade or the 4th grade, or ever since high school. I knew that this is what I wanted to be. I guess my question that I wanted to ask is, how do we become more intentional about providing those experiences for young Black men earlier to get, so that they're not falling into it, but they're working towards becoming Black male teachers? Hopefully that made sense to you all as I asked it. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I think that it comes down to, your ability to uplift education when they're younger, right? It's the experiences that they have when they're younger that puts a bad taste. And that's with a lot of people too, but it's the experiences. What are we doing as teachers in the classroom? All teachers, what are we doing to engage these kids to say that, you know what, education is all right? So when they get older and the teaching profession presents itself, that they're going to want to be a part of it. You know, I'm another guy that kind of fell into education. I wanted to be a football coach. Well, how does one become a football coach? Oh, you have to get a teaching credential? How do you do that? Oh, I have to go finish my degree. So I was really motivated to go be a football coach, and this is just where I ended up landing. Football ended. Well, what now? Administration, and then here I am. But I think it's about providing the experiences for the young folks to know that just because you talk loud in class, you're not going to be suspended for 3 days. And just because you might talk a little bit different than other folks, you're not going to be shunned by your teacher or be looked at as those kids. I think once that is out of education, right, that's an easy thing to do. But once systemic racist procedures and policies, zero tolerance policies and things like that, once they start working their way out, I think that it will start becoming more attractive to younger Black men, based on the experience that they had when they were younger, or that we've had when we were younger.
I couldn't agree more with you, Mr. Tolliver. I know this last school year, I taught 5th grade at Stephen Manor Elementary School here in Vallejo, and I had an opportunity to experience something different. I was part of a behavioral expectation program called PACS, part of the Vallejo School District SACE plan. And I had a chance to work with kids on how to self-regulate. Once I had an opportunity to kind of understand that and kind of understand, again, how we break down kids and how we help them understand their rights and their wrongs, understand that, you know, you're not going to be suspended because you don't feel well or you don't understand how this is happening or why this is happening. But here's a different alternative on how to help yourself better be in control. I started to notice a change. I became the timeout room. I like to call it. At one point in time, I had a student from every grade level in my classroom, from first grade, from kindergarten to my 5th grade class. I had a student in my class from some other class. And when my principal came back, he was kind of concerned. He was like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I was kind of in a hurry. Did they interrupt your class? I was just like, no, because I didn't give them the impression that you're going to go home, you're going to be suspended. Don't say anything in my class, be quiet. I gave them the impression that, hey, this is just a break from your class. Think about what you did, fix it, so you can go back to where you belong. I say, I enjoy having you here, but this isn't where you belong. This work may be a little too advanced for you. I always give them, any kid that came in my room got worksheets. If I was working on something, they got a piece of paper, they got a pencil, you watch me on the board. You take these notes, do these math problems, but you're not in trouble. I had to give them that impression that, they have, like you said, they have to have a better impression of the teacher and a better impression of what a teacher can be. A lot of times you see a male teacher, you automatically think disciplinarian. He yells, he screams, he's angry, he's aggressive. I don't want to get sent to his class because he's going to be all in my face. And I'm not even wanted to be in that way. And because I presented myself differently, kids were a little more receptive to what I had to say. It's kind of scary because it comes off as me trying or pushing my way to the top. Sometimes people can see it that way, as I was positioning myself for administration, but it was nowhere near that. I have no anticipation to go into administration yet. I applaud you guys, and that is your world. That is not my world. My little bubble is right here. But I absolutely agree with you. We have to change the narrative. The narrative of a male teacher is aggressive, and there really kind of is no narrative for African-American teachers because there's really no African-American male teachers. So I agree. We have to change kids' experiences of teachers. And that's why, like I said, I don't wear suit and tie. I wear t-shirts. I wear jeans. When my kids, we're in the transition period, we talk about shoes, we talk about YouTube, we talk about their interests. Because if I can change our perspective of what school is, you would want this. You want more of this. So.
Yeah, I agree with both of y'all too. I mean, it's the perception of teachers, the perception of teachers of color, and the perception of school itself. I think with there being, I think as you were kind of touching on, Mr. Henry, that there's not a lot of us in the teaching game. So it's like when one teacher of color is there, then it's like, okay, this is the prototype. Everybody's like, this is what a Black male teacher is. But that strips teachers of color or students who could become teachers of color of all the variety of what you can be as a teacher. I thought it was really great. At least I think maybe was it 2 years ago? I used to work with Mr. Tolliver, and at that year there were maybe I think 5 people of color on our staff, and just being there, you can see that there's no one way to be a Black teacher. It's like, or a Black person in education. Is all these varieties, and that begins to break the idea that we got to have a Black teacher and you're going to be unicorns and rainbows, and for everybody everything's going to be great. But it's like when students can see the variety, then they have more and more opportunity to see themselves, because every Black student is not the same, and they can see themselves in different teachers. When it comes to the education in general, I can't remember who was speaking on it, but in the first seminar, but he was mentioning going back and replacing the original pipeline of educators, or of education in general. And that just makes me think. I teach English, and I just have this thing when it comes to the classics, when people talk about the classic literature and things like that. And I mean, classic literature, some of the stories, I mean, they're good. They deserve to be read. But I'm like, who made these books classic? Who wrote these classic books? Like white people, you know what I mean? For the most part. And if we have students coming up from an early age and this is all they see, they don't see themselves. And I do see this starting to change as I look at new literature coming into the classrooms, but that's just kind of a snapshot of how education as a whole has to kind of be looked at, so that students can be able to see, students with color can be able to see themselves in this and kind of relate to it more. So education is more relevant and not just seen as, okay, this is something I have to do for the next 12 years, you know, then I'm out and then I can become a basketball player or something. So that's my thoughts on it.
I received some, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Coach. I'm gonna give you a chance to answer in a second, because I definitely I'm just keeping my eye on the time and want to make sure that we get to one of our audience's questions. And this may be this is for everyone, but this may be really better suited for Dr. Clark and Mr. Isidore. I know that someone had mentioned, one of our panelists had mentioned earlier about being used as a disciplinarian at school. And so one of our audience members asked, how do we support Black male educators who feel like the school is only valuing them for their ability to be, for lack of a better word, a disciplinarian or an overseer? How do we support them and help them not kind of get pigeonholed as the discipline guy when they're trying to actually be educators?
Well, just real quickly, I'll just say, going off of what Mr. Henry talked about, I was kind of the same way. I knew that I was fair and I knew that I could relate to kids very well. And so I really, for lack of a better word, I cherished that role because I knew that I would then take care of those kids. I would hold them accountable when need be, but also I wouldn't just sour them on the whole situation, because I understood it was much larger than whatever, getting sent out of class a little bit and not really wanting to turn that kid off on the whole school process just because they were sent out of class. But definitely, you can always have a conversation, with your administrator and say, look, I understand, that so-and-so is having trouble with their particular student. However, my job here is I'm responsible to these kids in my class, and I really need to focus on my kids, and I can't, do the discipline for someone else's class. That's really their responsibility. And so that's something you have to balance, because you have that nurturing, you have that nurturing about yourself, and you don't want to see a kid be harmed. You would rather scoop in and help that kid rather than leave that kid in the situation. But quite honestly, it's the other teacher's responsibility, and that is something that will help, sort of solve some of these issues that we're having in our schools. So, Mr. Isidore.
Yeah. One of the things was presented as I became the dean. I was the disciplinarian, the vice principal of the disciplinarian. I was involved in the discipline, the day-to-day discipline and the managerial part. But as I started to improve my craft, I saw that the relationship piece started to evolve. And I think what happens is people leave the issue of the disciplinarian, and once they understand that they've now made a connection to kids, the disciplinarian issue goes out the door. Because once you have a relationship with those students, the students of color, any student, or even those parents, once they see that you're very visible, that you're attending their event, and that you care from your heart, then you can now go with your agenda now to change school climate and culture. And it has to happen with building relationships. A lot of people struggle with building the relationships because they start looking at the issues of the day-to-day discipline and day-to-day drama. But once you get the relationship under control, then a student will listen to you. And being an African-American principal, a male principal in a school that predominantly doesn't look like me, I have to code switch and build relationships with kids who don't look like me. And when I can have a student who doesn't look like me care about me as a person, because I said, man, it was a great job at the play. It was a great job at the game. Oh, I saw you yesterday do that. Or I saw you in class. Then the relationship gets, I want to say, umbrellaed out. Man, Mr. Isidore is great. He saw me in my class and told me I was doing a great job. And the little things you do to improve relationships with kids will move the whole school once they know that you care. You saw Joe Clark in the movie Lean on Me. Joe Clark was a disciplinarian, but once he built a relationship with the kids, the whole student body stood behind him because they knew that his agenda was about caring.
I was an awesome answer there. And I think all of you in your own way have been talking about the relationship piece. Dr. Clark, I appreciate the way you flip that on his head and say, hey, like, if I'm not in this position to be able to show compassion and care, the other person who might be in this position instead of me is not going to do it the same way that I'm doing it. And so I particularly like that. Councilmember Brown, I have a question for you because, again, our audience is definitely in tune with everything that we're saying, and they're giving us questions to ask. Okay.
And if it's okay, I wanted to weigh in on a little bit about what you talked about earlier. But
okay, you wanna chime in first?
Yeah, real quick, as the only panelist who's not an educator up here, I must say that my dream job was to be an educator. But in my mind, number one, I wasn't exposed to the fact of what teachers make because I assumed they didn't make a lot. I saw Ms. Robinson said we are overeducated and underpaid. And that was my impression, was that I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to get paid. And I didn't see that as a profession. I always saw that, even as a young man, that if I could do anything outside of getting paid, I'd be a teacher. And secondly, I think that we can't, I obviously have a Vallejo kind of lens on, and I think of all of the Willie B. Atkins kids. You know, if we only limit ourselves to the Willie B. Atkins kids, then your pool's going to be small. What are we going to do to attract the kids who, you know, couldn't get into Willie B. Atkins? I remember me and my friends, we went to one Willie B. Atkins. We didn't feel comfortable. And then we went back 3 times and stood outside and looked in and never went back. So we have to do a better job of being able to pull in all those kids, because obviously in the position I'm in now, you could say, well, man, he could have been a teacher, but I didn't have anyone telling me what I might make or saying, hey, we're going to expand our talent pool. And that was my 2 cents.
No, and I think what you're saying is extremely important because, you know, I'll use myself as an example. I didn't get my BA until I was 27, 28. And then, you know, I went from there and went straight and got my PhD. And just like my educational career, I was a late bloomer, so to speak, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of times, to Councilmember Brown's point, we forget about our People's High students. We forget about our students that aren't we forget about those students because we're only focused on college as being something that you attain right out of high school, as opposed to something that maybe you go back when you're 23 and 24. Maybe you're on, like, I remember, oh man, I can't think of his name right now. But he was the former principal of John Finney. I remember him always saying, like, it took me 10, 15 years to get my BA degree, right? Mm-hmm. But once I got it, then I was able to get into education and become a teacher. And sometimes we got to think about, just because their lives aren't on track to go to college now doesn't mean that that'll always be the case. But for Councilmember Hakeem, given the number of African-American teachers, the minimal number of African-American teachers in our schools, what type of centralized network system or resources can be put in place to support teachers from a local local city government standpoint? Like, what can we do outside of the school districts to help support this pipeline that we're talking about?
I think that's a great question. I would say, so when I first got on council, one of the first things I did is go have a conversation with Dr. Clark. And I think that, you know, he's been someone who I can at least turn to and ask questions. And one of the things I asked Dr. Clark was, I said, how do we turn Vallejo into some of these other cities in the Bay Area that you've worked in? And what Dr. Clark, what stuck with me is he said, everybody has to care about kids, not just the school district, the chamber, the city, every aspect, you know, needs to be kid focused. And I think that when that dawned on me, and I looked around, I said, well, Vallejo really, not only are we not kid focused, but where is our soul, you know, compared to what can we do to assist our school district? Because I think that there was definitely a mindset of that's not our job. And what I had to do is say, these kids are in school 8 hours. We have them the rest of the time. They actually are just as much our job as anyone else. And so I think some of the things that we can do and some of the things we've done in Vallejo is, number one, as a African-American council member, I have to make sure that my values are being represented at City Hall, period. I have made it a point, you have to sit down with each and every director, talk to them about what you want to get done and how we can work together. And some of the things, and a lot of these directors share the same passion. For example, we're working on the housing development in North Vallejo, where we will make sure that part of it is going to be going to teachers in Vallejo and use that as a way to attract teachers. And that came from a conversation I had with the housing director, Judy Shepherd Hall, about systemic racism and how, you know, asking each director, what can we do together to address this issue? And so I think that, number one, being able to attract teachers and showing that, hey, we want to work with the school district to create housing for teachers, I think is very, very important. I think that we have to be a very kid first type of, you know, every every city needs to have kind of a theme. What are you really about? And I think that an easy theme is just, what are we doing with each and every move we make, development, economic development, everything? How will it affect kids? And how can we use this to uplift our kids? I've had that conversation with the police chief, the fire chief, water department. I just had a conversation with the Sand and Flood about, hey, what are you all doing to recruit young Vallejo kids and make sure Vallejo kids are a priority? So I think that at first it has to start with leadership and saying that it's not just the school district. We're just as much invested in these kids as anyone else. And a kid that ends up in jail or dead, that has to hit you like those are our kids. You know, we're responsible for that, not the school district, not anyone else. We have to hold ourselves responsible.
Thank you. So we have, I want to say about 4 minutes left. We could really go a whole nother hour on this conversation, at least the way that I'm feeling. But definitely I've gotten a lot. I know that our attendees have gotten a lot. Is there any final thoughts that you all would like to share before we close?
If I could share. Oh, go ahead, Mr.
sir. Go ahead, Mr. Henry. Go ahead.
Listen, low man on the totem pole. You guys go ahead. No, go.
I just wanted to say real quick, it's an honor to be here with educators making a difference. You all really are on the front lines. I mean, if it were up to me, at a young age, I realized that if football players make this and teachers make this, well, we have an imbalance here that if we don't address it, you know, we're going to have problems down the road. But I think it's very important as we're all talking and making sure we're communicating and being regional about this issue and seeing what can we do to work together. What can I learn from Fairfield? Staying in touch with Dr. Clark. What are they doing? Staying in touch with Mr. Isidore and Mr. Tolliver and figuring out how can we all work together. I think it's very important and something I'd love to do.
Yep, and lastly, I'll just say real quick, we have to continue to work with higher ed. So just with Toro doing things, such as this, but we have community colleges out there. We have 4-year universities out there, and we as those who have been to school and have those connections and understand how the college system works, we have to help bridge some of that knowledge and continue to pass that along, whether it's to, folks who are 18 to 25, or whether it's kids in high school, or whether it's, someone who's 30 years old. We can help people, direct them to show them the process that this is attainable for anybody.
Again, I'd like to say thank you so very much. It's been a great opportunity. It'd be great somewhere in our cities that we could celebrate educators. The more kids see our educators being celebrated and honored, just like the BET Awards, there should be something for educators where the kids say, oh, that's my teacher. I didn't know that. And the more we celebrate educators publicly, and the more that we celebrate them in the newspaper, online, the more kids are around seeing that occur, the better it'll be, where we get more kids going into that pipeline for education. So again, it's been great, and I want to thank everybody for the opportunity.
Real quick, I just wanted to, I keep talking about the experience that kids have. I think that we as educators, not just those of us on the panel, but those of us that are listening out there, we have an obligation to make sure that teachers who are not willing to build relationship with students are in fact making relationships with students. Because the last thing that I remember last year at the school that I was at, no, I'm a math teacher. I don't care what this kid is. I'm not saying you have to be their friend, but you have to be willing to build a relationship, because what that takes is you willing to give a piece of you up in order to build a relationship with someone that you may not be able to identify with. And when we see that as educators, again, not just those of us on the panel, but those of us listening, we need to call them folks out, and we need to have that uncomfortable discourse with those teachers that aren't doing that.
And not really much I can add, but grateful to be here. And those relationships, as Tolliver and other of you are pointing out, are just so important to be building. just working towards with our students, even with each other, as Tyler were talking about, just making sure we're all on the same page, that we need to be just caring about people. And once we care, when it's come from our heart, there's like a lot of these things kind of work themselves out in a sense when we're seeing people as people, no matter who they are.
Guess to wrap it up, again, I'm very honored. I appreciate all of you guys taking your time and adding me in. I think what I would say is, I know in the Black community, we look at each other almost as crabs in a bucket. You know, someone's always looking to get ahead of somebody somehow. We're always looking to get ahead, even if it's on the back of someone else. I think that we all should find time to come together. Find time to, you know, like Mr. Scott said, make relationships, build relationships with not only our students, but other members in the community, other, you know, people across the way. I know I tend to keep in contact with a really good friend of mine, who's African-American teacher at Jesse Bethel, Corey Mishak. I talk to healthcare professionals like Desiree Miranda. I talk to other African-American women, Lauren Keaton, another teacher. I definitely think that we all should strive to build the community, come together and lift each other up, because we all know someone who would make a great teacher. It's just that they don't have the mindset to take that leap and get out there and do it. So I think we all should just encourage each other, be positive, look for that opportunity to push someone into the opportunity that we have.
Thank you all. I definitely appreciate you all joining us today for this conversation. This is just the first conversation of many that we're going to have that is related to this topic and just the overall theme of diversity. Now, I want to invite personally all of our panelists and any of our attendees that have been participating in the webinar to join our Diversity Educators Network. I have been fortunate enough to work with Touro University for the last year in partnership with Solano County Office of Education on trying to develop an actual pipeline for educators of color to become a part of. We are looking to try to figure out, how do we get young people to become interested in becoming teachers? How do we get the para that is at your school that is great with kids but doesn't have their credential? How do we get the campus supervisor? Like, how do we get the mom that is so invested in her child's education but just doesn't have the credential yet to be? We're trying to figure out, how do we recruit these folks and actually get them to become teachers in our schools here in Solano County. And we have been making great progress as we've been thinking about it. I think right now we've kind of zeroed in on developing a youth track and trying to give our youth some opportunities. And we're looking at this COVID environment as really an opportunity to reimagine what this pipeline can look like. And how do we take the distance learning, the virtual opportunity, how do we maximize those so that we actually begin to give folks experiences so they can say, I fell into becoming a teacher when I was in my 10th grade or in the 11th grade or in the 12th grade, right? And so if you all are interested, we're going to be giving out information, but we hope that we can get you all to participate as well as our attendees, because we want to really diversify. There's no reason why our teachers should not mirror the communities of Solano County. And I really believe that if we can do that, we can take the education in our county to the next level. So with that, I'll defer back to Louise and Lisa, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, this is fantastic. As Ijeoma said, we're going to be continuing this conversation every week and then every month at our DEN meeting, our Diverse Educator Network DEN meeting. That's our working group. That's where we roll up the sleeves and we're like, how are we going to, come up with some great solutions? And we have some districts already on board, Vallejo being one of them, Fairfield also at the cabinet level saying, yes, we're going to do what we want to do, what we can to support this. And so we need all of your ideas and input. And also at Touro, we have our health equity series. And so we have another webinar series that many of you will likely be interested in, because it really is same issues, but in the health arena. How are we really promoting and pushing the equity issues that are in that particular discipline? So all of this is fantastic. And then at our Touro University, we have our master's in equity, diversity, and inclusive education that Dr. Pamela Redmond developed. She's also on this call. And Ijeoma is going to be taking the reins and coordinating that master's degree program because we know that there is a lot of work to do. And in that particular master's program, teachers who already have a credential but would like to add the additional 18 units to get their master's can really hyper-focus in on equity, diversity, and inclusion and add the master's to their teaching credentials. So that's another opportunity for folks to continue to not just continue to be part of the conversation, but live the conversation in a deeper way. So so many opportunities. A lot of those links were in the chat. And so I know there was a whole lot out there. And also thank you to Council Member Hakeem Brown, who put his email address in the chat also. So feel free to contact him directly. And just thank you to all of you who have been such a wonderful set of panelists for this great conversation. So Dr. Norton, back to you, last word.
Sure. So I just kind of want to reiterate what Councilman Brown said. And Hakeem and I went through Leadership Vallejo together. We were in the same group. And so I feel like we've really, bonded. And I so appreciate every single person on this, panelist on this call. I want to really see how do we build bridges, because it's not just an education issue. It is really about building healthy communities. And we will never build healthy communities without laser focusing on our youth. So I really think that bridging our healthcare communities, we need the Kaiser and the Sutter and the North Bays to really partner with us on mentoring our kids. And so I really want to challenge us at Touro specifically of how do we help build those bridges and help build diverse educators. It's a passion of mine. My research focuses on this area. I look at diversity in general, but I also specifically look at Latinas and building the Latina Leader Pipeline. But I think that, at the end of the day, Jeffrey and Michael, I just so applaud both of you for what you're doing. And I'm a former kindergarten teacher, and I think, and I used to also work with youth with unhoused youth and youth, at the time it was said at risk. I don't like that term, but I feel like it's really just approaching every day with, I really love my kids. I love my kids, even though they piss me off, even though they're hard to deal with some days. Ultimately, I love my kids and I want them to have the same opportunities and future that I have had. And so I think that, yes, there are salary issues. There are so many issues when it comes to being a teacher and going that pipeline. But I also think there's such amazing, amazing benefits that come out of being a teacher and an educator. And so I thank all the attendees that came on. I'm actually really excited. We had 50 for our first one. And help us spread the word. Please join our Diversity Educators Network. We've been doing this for over a year now, and we have so many different players involved. So I think I agree. And Councilman Brown, when you came and met with me, I will never forget this, because you said we need to reach not just the A+ students or even the B+ students or even the C+ students. How do we reach the D- students? Because we know, Aaron Tolliver, the education system is infused with racism, just like higher ed is infused with racism. And how do we start to fight against these anti-oppressive structures and reimagine and recreate a different higher ed and a different K-12 education community together? We're not separate silos. This is all part of the same picture. So, and it's also very sexist as well, as many of the women on the call have probably encountered throughout our careers. So thank you all so much. Please keep joining us if you have time. And don't be surprised if we call upon you again to kind of maybe be a panelist in the future and work with us on other initiatives, because we need you desperately, but we also need everybody that's not here today too. So we'll work on that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, I think that is it for us. Please don't forget to tap in next week. Next week we will be, I just had it in front of me. Next week, we will be talking about Man, someone help me.
I thought it was like schools.
Hybrid learning.
Yes, we're talking about hybrid learning and what are we doing in this crisis. So thank you, Coach Isidore, Mr. Tolliver, Mr. Scott, Councilmember Brown, Mr. Henry, and Superintendent Clark. We really appreciate you all joining us today. And don't forget to tune in next week. You might get some from next week's conversation as well.